$50 meant food for her baby. She sent it to the wrong number. Hours later, her phone buzzed, not with a refund, but with 50,000. And a single question that changed everything. What's your name? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now back to our story. Ariel's thumb hovered over send. $50. Her last $50. Rent was overdue, Micah needed formula, and her shift didn't start for another 6 hours. She typed the landlord's number from memory, muscle memory really, after 3 months of begging for extensions, and hit transfer before doubt could stop her. The screen blinked green, transfer successful. Then her stomach dropped. The number staring back at her wasn't her landlord's. 1 digit off. One stupid, exhausted, bone-tired mistake, and her baby's food money just vanished into the void. She texted immediately, fingers shaking, "I'm so sorry. That was a mistake. Please, I need that money back." Across the city, behind floor-to-ceiling glass 40 stories above the noise, Grant Larkin stared at his phone like it had just spoken a language he'd forgotten. A plea. Not a pitch, not a proposal, just raw, unfiltered desperation from a stranger who had no idea who he was. He poured himself a drink he wouldn't finish and read the message again. $50. Imagine that being the difference between surviving and breaking. He didn't reply. Not yet. But something in his chest, something he thought had died years ago, stirred. By the time Ariel gave up hope and whispered to her sleeping son, "We'll make it work, baby," her phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number, what's your name? That question wasn't about the money. It was about whether two people, separated by wealth, zip codes, and every statistic that says their world should never touch, could find something real in the space between a mistake and a miracle. Late evening. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Ariel Porter sat on the floor of her apartment, back against the worn couch she bought secondhand 3 years ago, rocking Micah in her arms. The baby finally stopped fussing, his tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. She understood the feeling. The rent notice was still taped to her door, bright orange, impossible to ignore. 5 days overdue. Her landlord had stopped being understanding 2 months ago, right around the time her car broke down and she had to choose between fixing it or feeding her son. She chose Micah. She'd always choose Micah. Her phone sat on the floor beside her, screen glowing with her banking app still open. $50. That's what was left after her last shift at the diner, after tips that barely covered gas, after another week of stretching every dollar until it screamed. $50 to last until Friday. She closed her eyes and did the math she'd already done 17 times that day. Formula, $22. Diapers, $18. That left $10 for groceries, rice, eggs, maybe some bread if it was on sale. The landlord would have to wait. Again. But when she opened her eyes and saw that transfer confirmation to the wrong number, the math didn't matter anymore. Panic hit her like ice water. She grabbed the phone, hands trembling, and typed out the message fast, before pride could stop her, before shame could tell her not to beg. "I'm so sorry. That was a mistake. Please, I need that money back." Send. Then she waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. Micah stirred in her arms, making those little sounds that meant he'd be hungry soon. She looked down at him, 8 months old, all chubby cheeks and innocent trust, and felt something crack inside her chest. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "Mama messed up." She pressed her forehead against his and let the tears come quietly, the kind of crying you do when you can't afford to fall apart but can't hold it together either. Her phone stayed silent. Grant Larkin stood at the window of his penthouse, watching the city lights blink like stars that forgot how to dream. His phone buzzed on the marble counter behind him. He almost didn't check it. These days, every notification felt like noise. Business. Meetings. People who wanted something from him but never actually wanted him. But something made him turn around. Unknown number. A message. "I'm so sorry. That was a mistake. Please, I need that money back." He stared at it, confused at first, then opened his banking app. $50. Someone had accidentally sent him $50. He read the message again, slower this time, and something about the words hit differently. Not the amount. The tone. Please. I need that money back. Not can you or would you mind. Just need. Plain. Honest. Desperate in a way that felt uncomfortably real. Grant set his drink down and walked back to the window, phone still in hand. Somewhere down there in that grid of lights, someone was panicking over $50. Someone for whom that amount wasn't a rounding error or a tip at brunch, it was survival. When was the last time anything he did actually mattered to someone? He thought about his daughter. The one who never got to take her first breath. The one whose nursery he'd paid someone else to dismantle because he couldn't bear to do it himself. He thought about his ex-wife, who'd left him not because he was cruel but because he'd become hollow. Empty. A man who'd built an empire but forgotten how to be human. He looked at the message again. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He should just send the 50 back. Quick transfer, problem solved, back to his expensive silence. But instead, he typed something else. What's your name? He hit send before logic could stop him. Then he stood there, heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years, waiting to see if a stranger would answer. Ariel's phone buzzed, just as she'd given up hope. She nearly dropped Micah reaching for it. Unknown number, what's your name? She blinked at the screen, confused. What kind of question was that? He wasn't asking about the money. He wasn't saying yes or no. He was asking about her? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to protect herself from whatever game this was. But another part, the part that had been invisible for so long, wanted to be seen. She typed slowly. Ariel. My name is Ariel. Send. Then she added, because honesty was all she had left. I'm a single mom. That $50 was supposed to be for groceries. I'm not trying to scam you or guilt you. I really need it back. 40 stories up, Grant read her message 3 times. Ariel. He typed back. I'm Grant. And you're not getting $50 back. He watched the 3 dots appear, then disappear, then appear again. He could feel her panic through the screen. Before she could spiral, he added, check your account. Then he made the transfer. Not $50. 50,000. He set his phone down and walked away from it, heart racing, half expecting to regret it in the morning. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than numb. He felt awake. Ariel's banking app notification came through at 11:47 p.m. Deposit, $50,000. She stared at the screen. Blinked. Stared again. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. This was a glitch, a scam, some kind of cruel joke the universe was playing on a woman who'd already been through enough. She refreshed the app. The number didn't change. Her hands started shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. Micah squirmed in her arms, sensing her energy shift from exhaustion to something electric and terrifying. She called her bank's automated line, entering her account number with trembling fingers, waiting through the prompts until the robotic voice confirmed. Your current balance is $50,063.18. She hung up. Then she screamed, not loud because Micah was right there, but a sharp, breathless sound that came from somewhere deep and disbelieving. Tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't tell if they were from relief or fear or the sheer impossibility of what just happened. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number, no Grant. It's real. I meant to send it. She typed back with shaking hands. Why? Why would you do this? The response came quickly. Because you asked. And no one ever asks me for something real. Ariel sat there on her apartment floor, baby in her arms, $50,000 in her account, and a stranger's words on her screen that felt more intimate than anything she'd heard in years. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry or pray. So she did all 3. She couldn't sleep. Even after Micah finally dozed off in his crib, even after she triple-checked her bank account to make sure the money was still there, Ariel lay awake staring at her phone. Grant's last message glowed in the darkness. Because you asked. And no one ever asks me for something real. What did that even mean? Who was this person? Why would someone send a stranger $50,000? Was he dangerous? Was this some kind of trap? But what kind of trap involved actually giving someone life-changing money? Her mind raced through possibilities, each one more wild than the last, until exhaustion finally started pulling her under. Before she could stop herself, she typed one more message. "I don't understand you, Grant." She hit send and closed her eyes, not expecting a response at this hour. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "Good. I don't understand me either. But I understood your message." And that was enough. Then another one. "Get some sleep, Ariel. Tomorrow, you have groceries to buy." For the first time in 8 months, Ariel Porter went to sleep without worrying about money. But she woke up worrying about something else entirely. What do you owe a stranger who just changed your life? But to understand why a $50 mistake became a $50,000 miracle, you have to understand the two people behind those screens. One was a woman who'd learned to survive on scraps and willpower, whose life had been a series of losses dressed up as lessons. The other was a man who'd achieved everything society told him to want, only to discover that success without purpose feels an awful lot like dying slowly. Both of them were broken in different ways. Both of them were searching for something they couldn't name. And both of them, without knowing it yet, were about to become each other's lifeline. Let me take you back to where their stories really began. 3 years earlier, Ariel Porter had been a different person. She'd been a nursing student with a future mapped out in careful detail. She'd been in love with a man named Marcus Chun who made her laugh until her stomach hurt and who talked about their someday children like they were already real. She'd been someone who believed hard work and good intentions were enough to build a life on. Then Marcus died. Not dramatically. Not in some tragic accident that would have at least made sense of the grief. He died from an undiagnosed heart condition while picking up takeout on a Tuesday night. One moment he was texting her about whether she wanted spring rolls, the next he was gone. The funeral was small. His family blamed her for reasons she never fully understood, something about stress, about her pushing him too hard to work extra shifts to save for their future. They stopped returning her calls 2 weeks after they buried him. She found out she was pregnant 6 weeks after that. The nursing program didn't care about her circumstances. Miss too many clinicals, fail out. Simple math. She withdrew, planning to return after the baby came, after she got her feet under her again. But grief doesn't follow timelines, and neither does poverty. By the time Micah was born, Ariel's savings were gone. Her parents had passed years before, her mother from cancer, her father from a heart that gave up 6 months later. No siblings. No safety net. Just her and a newborn who deserved better than what she could give him. The adoption agency counselor had kind eyes. She showed Ariel profiles of couples with big houses and stable incomes and futures that looked nothing like the cramped apartment where Ariel could barely afford heat. "He'll have everything," the counselor said gently. "You're giving him a gift." Ariel held Micah for 3 hours straight that night, memorizing his face, the weight of him, the way he grabbed her finger like she was his whole world. Then she called the agency back and said no. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe it was stupid. But he was hers, and she was his, and that had to mean something. So she became a waitress instead of a nurse. She worked doubles and triples, smiled through harassment from customers who tipped in loose change, came home so exhausted she sometimes cried while warming up bottles. She learned to stretch $15 across a week, learned which food pantries didn't ask questions, learned how to be invisible in a world that punished poverty like it was a moral failing. She learned to survive. But surviving isn't the same as living. And on the night she sent $50 to the wrong number, she'd been barely surviving for so long she'd forgotten what living even looked like. Grant Larkin's story started with success and ended with silence. He'd built his first company at 23, a tech startup that solved a problem most people didn't know they had until his software made their lives easier. The acquisition came at 27. The second company at 29. By 32, he was on magazine covers with headlines that called him a visionary. He met his wife, Vanessa, at a charity gala he'd been obligated to attend. She was different from the others, sharp, ambitious, unimpressed by his wealth. She challenged him, made him feel like more than his bank account. They got married on a beach in Santorini. The wedding cost more than most people's houses. For a while, it was good. Great, even. They talked about the future in the abstract way people do when they think they have all the time in the world. Then Vanessa got pregnant, and the abstract became concrete, and Grant discovered a kind of joy he didn't know existed. They painted the nursery pale yellow. Bought a crib that converted into a toddler bed and then a full bed because they were planning ahead, planning for a life that stretched out before them like a promise. Vanessa went into labor 3 weeks early. The doctors said sometimes these things just happen. A cord wrapped wrong. A heartbeat that slowed and then stopped. They tried everything, but some things can't be fixed with money or technology or desperation. Their daughter was born silent. They named her Lily anyway. Held her for 2 hours before the nurses took her away. Grant remembered every second of those 2 hours, the weight of her impossibly light, the perfection of her tiny fingers, the way Vanessa cried without making a sound. After that, their marriage became a museum of grief. They moved through the motions, speaking in careful tones about logistics and schedules, avoiding the nursery neither of them could bear to enter. Grant threw himself into work. Vanessa threw herself into therapy. Neither of them threw themselves at each other. The divorce papers came on what would have been Lily's 2nd birthday. Vanessa didn't ask for much. She had her own money, her own life to rebuild. She just wanted out of the tomb their home had become. "You're not here anymore," she told him the last time they spoke. "You're physically present, but emotionally gone. And I can't live with a ghost." She wasn't wrong. Grant spent the next 3 years building his empire higher and feeling emptier. He attended meetings, closed deals, made decisions that affected thousands of people. He dated occasionally, beautiful women who looked good in photographs, but who never got close enough to see the hollow space where his heart used to be. He had everything except a reason to care about any of it. Until a stranger accidentally sent him $50 and really asked, for help. That message cracked something open inside him. Something small but vital. A reminder that needs still existed, that he could still be useful in a way that mattered. So he sent $50,000 to a woman he'd never met, and for the first time since Lily died, he felt something other than numb. He felt alive. Ariel woke up convinced it had been a dream. She reached for her phone before her eyes fully opened, pulling up her banking app with hands that still trembled from yesterday's panic. Balance, $50,063.18. Real. Still real. Impossibly, terrifyingly real. Micah was crying in his crib, hungry like always, but for once Ariel didn't feel that immediate clench of anxiety about whether she had enough formula. She could buy formula. She could buy groceries. She could pay rent. She could breathe. But the relief was tangled with something darker, fear. Who was Grant? What did he want? People didn't just give strangers $50,000 without expecting something in return. The world didn't work like that. She fed Micah while staring at her phone, composing and deleting messages in her head. Finally, she typed, "I need to know this is real. That you meant it. That you're not going to take it back." The response came within minutes. "It's real. I'm not taking it back. Buy your baby some food, Ariel." She read it 3 times, searching for hidden meanings, for warning signs she'd learned to recognize in men who said one thing but meant another. But there was nothing. Just straightforward honesty that felt too simple to be true. She typed, "Why? I don't understand why you do this." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She held her breath. "Because 3 years ago my daughter died, and I forgot what it felt like to help someone who actually needed it. You reminded me. That's all." Ariel's breath caught. She read the message again, slower, seeing past the words to the grief underneath. This wasn't a scam. This wasn't manipulation. This was a broken man trying to feel human again. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said the truth. "I'm sorry about your daughter. And, thank you. You have no idea what this means." "Maybe I do. More than you think." 3 days later, the landlord showed up. Not with another notice. Not with threats. He showed up personally, knocking hard enough that Micah startled awake from his nap. Ariel opened the door with the baby on her hip, exhaustion making her movements slow. "Porter." The landlord, a man named Kendrick who smelled like cigars and wore his cruelty like cologne, crossed his arms. "Rent. Now. Or you're out by Friday." She'd been expecting this. Had planned for it, even. But hearing the words still made her stomach drop. "I have it," she said quietly. "Give me 5 minutes." His eyebrows shot up. "You have it?" "Yes." "All of it?" including late fees. All of it. She transferred the money while he watched, making sure he saw the confirmation before he could call her a liar. His expression shifted from smug to confused to something that looked almost like disappointment. He wanted her to fail. She could see it in his eyes. But not today. "Pleasure doing business," she said, and closed the door in his face. Then she leaned against it and cried, not from sadness but from the sheer relief of not having to fight this particular battle anymore. Her phone buzzed. "Grant, everything okay?" She blinked at the message, surprised. How did he? But then she realized, he wasn't psychic. He was just checking in. Like a person who cared. "Rent's paid. Micah has food. I bought vegetables that weren't on sale. It's a good day. That's the best thing I've heard all week." She smiled despite herself, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "What do you do, Grant? Like for work?" "I run a tech company. Very boring stuff. Software solutions for corporate logistics." "That doesn't sound boring. That sounds impressive." "It's impressive in the way a really expensive funeral is impressive. Technically beautiful, but ultimately empty." Ariel huffed a small laugh. There was something darkly honest about the way he talked. No filters. No pretense. "What about you?" he asked. "What did you want to be before life got complicated?" The question hit her harder than she expected. "A nurse. I was in school when Micah's dad died. Had to drop out." "I'm sorry." "It is what it is." That's what people say when they're tired of explaining their pain to people who won't understand anyway. She stared at the message, throat tight. He was right. That's exactly what it was. "Yes," she typed. "I guess it is." Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. They kept talking. Not about money. Not about logistics. Just talking. The way people do when they're both awake at 2 a.m. and the darkness makes honesty easier. "Grant, what's Micah's favorite food?" "Ariel, mashed sweet potatoes. He gets it everywhere. I spend half my life wiping orange goop off surfaces." "Grant, sounds messy." "Ariel, sounds like parenthood." Another night. "Ariel, what do you do when you can't sleep?" "Grant, stand at my window and count lights. Pretend each one is a person with a life less hollow than mine." "Ariel, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "Grant, welcome to my TED Talk on Millionaire depression." She laughed out loud at that one, startling Micah awake. She felt guilty for a second, but only a second. When was the last time she'd laughed at something that wasn't bitter? They traded pieces of themselves in fragments. He told her about Lily. She told him about Marcus. He admitted he hadn't been to therapy in a year because talking about his feelings felt like performance art. She admitted she sometimes resented Micah for ruining her dreams, then immediately hated herself for it. "That doesn't make you a bad mother," Grant wrote. "That makes you human." Human feels like a luxury I can't afford. Then maybe that's what the money was for. Not groceries. Permission to feel human again. She stared at that message for a long time. 3 weeks after the transfer, something shifted. Grant sent a message at 1:47 a.m. "I keep thinking about what you said. About not understanding why I sent the money." Ariel was awake. Micah had a cold and wouldn't sleep, so she responded immediately. "And I think I sent it because I needed to matter to someone. Not as a bank account or a CEO. Just as a person who saw another person struggling and did something about it. You do matter, Grant. Not the way I mattered when you said please. That felt real. Everything else in my life is polished and fake and designed to impress people I don't actually like." Ariel's chest tightened. She typed slowly. "I don't need you to be impressive. I just need you to be honest." Then here's honesty. Talking to you is the best part of my day. Every day. And I don't know what that means or if it's weird to say, but it's true. She sat there in the dark, Micah breathing softly against her chest, phone glowing in her hand. She should be scared. This was moving into territory she hadn't planned for. But instead, she felt something else. She felt seen. "It's not weird," she finally typed. "And for what it's worth, Same. A few nights later, Ariel was putting away groceries, real groceries, not just rice and ramen, when her phone buzzed. Grant, I don't want to fix you. She froze, confused, heart suddenly racing. Was this where it turned? Where he revealed what he actually wanted? The three dots appeared again. I just wanted to remind you you're not invisible. Ariel read it 3 times. Then she set down the can of soup she'd been holding, sank onto the kitchen floor, and cried. Not from sadness. Not from fear. From being seen by someone who expected nothing in return except the permission to care. She typed through tears. You did. You really did. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that suddenly felt a little less empty, Grant Larkin smiled for the first time in 3 years and meant it. Ariel's cousin Tasha meant well. That's what she said later anyway, when everything had already spiraled out of control and apologies couldn't undo the damage. It started with a TikTok. Tasha had come over to drop off some hand-me-down baby clothes and found Ariel actually smiling for once, standing in her kitchen with fresh groceries on the counter, real food, not just the bare minimum she'd been surviving on for months. Girl, what happened? Tasha asked, eyes wide. Did you hit the lottery? Ariel hesitated. She'd kept the story private, mostly because she still didn't fully understand it herself. But Tasha was family, and keeping secrets from family felt wrong. So she told her. About the wrong number. The $50. The stranger who'd sent $50,000 back. The text messages that had become something she looked forward to more than sleep. Tasha's jaw dropped. That's insane. That's like, movie-level insane. I know, Ariel said, feeling her cheeks warm. But it's private, okay? I don't want people. Oh my God, of course, Tasha said quickly. I won't say anything. She posted the video 3 hours later. Not with names. Not with details that would identify anyone specifically. Just the story. My cousin accidentally sent $50 to a stranger and he sent back $50,000, loudly crying, face sparkles, faith in humanity restored. The video went viral overnight. 20,000 views by morning. 200,000 by noon. 1 million by dinner. The comments section exploded. This is fake. If this is real, I'm crying. Someone find out who the man is, I need to know. Single mom struggling and a millionaire with a heart? We love to see it. Then the news outlets picked it up. By the second day, Ariel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers. Local news stations. National morning shows. Everyone wanted the story, wanted her face, wanted to package her struggle into a 3-minute feel-good segment. She stopped answering after the first 5 calls. But they found her anyway. A reporter showed up at the diner during her shift, camera crew in tow, asking if she was the miracle money mom. Her manager pulled her aside, face tight with barely concealed annoyance. This is disrupting service, he said. Take the rest of the day off. Figure this out. She went home to find 2 news vans parked outside her apartment building. Her neighbors stared as she walked past, Micah crying in her arms, reporters shouting questions she didn't know how to answer. How did you meet him? Is this a romantic relationship? Did you know he was wealthy when you texted? She slammed the door behind her and locked it, heart pounding, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped her keys. Her phone buzzed. Not Grant. She hadn't heard from him in 2 days, which felt like silence after weeks of constant conversation. It was Tasha. Ari, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would blow up like this. I took it down, but people already screen-recorded it. Ariel didn't respond. She was too angry, too overwhelmed, too busy watching her privacy get shredded in real time. Another text came through. An unknown number. We're willing to pay $15,000 for an exclusive interview. Call this number. She deleted it. Then she pulled up her conversation with Grant and stared at his last message, sent 48 hours ago. You make me believe in people again. She'd sent a heart emoji back. Nothing since. Where was he now? Did he know what was happening? Was he angry? Regretting everything? She typed, Grant, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this would happen. Please tell me you're okay. The message was delivered, but didn't show as read. She waited. And waited. Nothing. Grant found out about the viral story the way he found out about most crises, from his assistant's panicked voice on the phone at 6 a.m. "We have a situation," Olivia said, skipping greetings entirely. "You need to see this." She sent him the link. He watched the TikTok with growing dread, then scrolled through the comments, the news articles, the speculation spreading like wildfire. Then his phone rang again. His head of PR this time. "Tell me you didn't actually send $50,000 to a random woman," Brett said, voice clipped and professional, but with an edge of barely restrained frustration. "I don't see how that's anyone's business," Grant replied. "It became everyone's business when it went viral. The board wants an emergency meeting. They're calling it charitable misconduct and questioning your judgment." Grant closed his eyes. "It was my personal money. I can do whatever I want with it. Not when you're the face of a publicly traded company. Not when our stock price dropped 2% this morning because investors are worried you're having some kind of breakdown. 2% is nothing. It's 2% based on a feel-good story. Imagine what happens if this turns into something ugly. If she starts asking for more. If the media finds out you've been texting her." Grant's jaw tightened. "She's not like that. You don't know what she's like. You met her through a wrong number 3 weeks ago." But Grant did know. He knew the way she texted at 2 a.m. when Micah wouldn't sleep. He knew she'd used the money for rent and groceries, not luxury. He knew she laughed at his dark humor and called him out when he was being self-pitying. He knew her better than he'd known most people in his life. "Handle the PR however you need to," Grant said finally. "But I'm not apologizing for helping someone." "Then at least stop talking to her. For both your sakes." Grant hung up without responding. Then he stared at Ariel's messages, dozens of them over the past weeks, a thread of honesty in a life built on performance, and didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. Ariel had never realized how much space Grant's messages filled until they stopped coming. She checked her phone obsessively, refreshed their conversation, watched for the 3 dots that never appeared. The reporters eventually left when she refused to comment. Her neighbors stopped staring quite so obviously. But the damage was done. She'd become a spectacle. Her private miracle turned into public entertainment. And Grant was gone. She told herself it made sense. He was probably dealing with his own fallout. Rich people had different problems, different pressures. Of course he'd distance himself. But logic didn't stop the ache in her chest every time she opened their messages and saw nothing new. She hadn't realized how dependent she'd become on those conversations until they vanished. How much she'd started to care about this stranger who'd seen her at her lowest and hadn't looked away. 1 week passed. Then 2. She stopped checking as often. Started accepting that maybe this was just how it ended, not with cruelty or betrayal, but with silence. The quiet death of something that had barely begun. Grant tried to go back to normal. Meetings. Emails. Conference calls where he made decisions that moved millions of dollars, but felt completely meaningless. He'd stopped texting Ariel because his PR team advised it, because the board was watching him like hawks, because getting attached to someone he'd never even met seemed insane when examined in daylight. But the silence felt worse than any crisis. His penthouse felt emptier than before. The city lights outside his window looked duller. He poured drinks he didn't finish and attended dinners where people talked at him without saying anything real. He missed her. Not the idea of her. Not the story. Just her. The way she typed in lowercase when she was tired. The way she sent him photos of Micah covered in food with captions like, "This is my life now." The way she listened when he talked about Lily without trying to fix his grief with empty platitudes. 3 weeks after the story went viral, Grant sat in a board meeting where they discussed reputation management strategies and realized he didn't care about any of it. The company would be fine. The stock would recover. Life would move on. But he'd lost something that actually mattered. And for what? To protect an image he'd never cared about in the first place? He left the meeting early, ignoring Brett's protests, and went home to stare at his phone like a teenager afraid to text first. Ariel was giving Micah a bath when someone pounded on her door. Not knocked. Pounded. She dried her hands and opened it to find Kendrick standing there with a smirk that made her stomach turn. "Porter, we need to talk." "I paid rent," she said flatly. "On time. You have no reason to be here." Oh, I think I do. He crossed his arms. See, you're famous now. Saw you on the news. Single mom gets 50 grand from mystery millionaire. Real heartwarming stuff. What do you want? I want you out. Ariel's breath caught. What? You can afford better now, right? So find it. I'm not running a charity here, and having reporters sniffing around is bad for business. I want you gone by the end of the month. You can't do that. I have a lease. And I have a clause about disturbances to other tenants. Your little media circus counts. So pack up, or I'll start eviction proceedings that'll make your life hell. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the doorway with rage and panic warring in her chest. She'd paid her rent. She'd done everything right. And it still wasn't enough. She closed the door slowly and slid down against it, head in her hands, trying not to cry because Micah was still in the tub and she couldn't fall apart when he needed her. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, couldn't handle another reporter, another person wanting a piece of her story. But something made her look. Not a text. A call. The number looked familiar. Her heart jumped into her throat. She answered. Ariel. Grant's voice, slightly rough, like he'd been holding his breath. Don't hang up. She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I know I disappeared, he continued. And I'm sorry. My company. It got complicated. But I need to know. He paused. She heard him exhale. Do you trust me, Ariel? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd shared through screens, every 2 a.m. confession and awkward joke and moment of raw honesty. She thought about the past 3 weeks. The silence that had felt like abandonment. The way the money had turned from miracle to curse. The landlord's smirk and the reporter's invasive questions, and the way her privacy had been shredded for public consumption. She thought about Grant's texts. The way he'd asked about Micah's favorite food. The way he'd admitted his grief without performing it. The way he'd sent money not to fix her, but to see her. She whispered, yes. Then pack a bag, Grant said. Not everything. Just what you need for a few days. I'm sending a car. Grant, what? Your landlord is an opportunistic parasite. You don't owe him anything. But you need space to think without cameras outside your door. I can't just leave. You can. Bring Micah. There's a guest suite no one uses. No strings. No expectations. Just space. Ariel's mind raced. This was crazy. She barely knew him. But then again, did she? They'd shared more in 3 weeks of texts than she'd shared with people she'd known for years. Why did you stop talking to me? She asked quietly. Grant was silent for a moment. Because people told me it was the smart thing to do. And I've spent 3 weeks realizing I'm tired of doing the smart thing when the smart thing feels like dying slowly. Something in her chest loosened. I miss talking to you, he said, voice softer. And I should have said that 2 weeks ago instead of disappearing. Yeah, she said, half laughing, half crying. You really should have. So, do you trust me? Ariel looked around her cramped apartment, at the life she'd built from scraps and stubbornness, at Micah playing with bath toys and depending on her to make the right choice. She thought about what trust even meant. Maybe it wasn't about knowing someone perfectly. Maybe it was about believing they wouldn't hurt you on purpose. I trust you, she said. Then let me help. Not with money this time. Just, let me be there. 30 minutes later, a car pulled up outside her building. Ariel stood in the doorway with Micah on her hip and a duffel bag over her shoulder, heart pounding, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time in 3 weeks, the silence was gone. And that felt like enough. The car that picked up Ariel wasn't what she expected. Not a limousine. Not some sleek black luxury vehicle with tinted windows. Just a regular sedan with a kind-faced driver who helped her with the car seat and didn't ask questions when her hands shook buckling Micah in. The drive through the city felt surreal. She watched familiar streets give way to unfamiliar ones, buildings growing taller and more expensive with each block. Her phone buzzed constantly, Tasha apologizing again, her manager asking when she'd be back, unknown numbers she didn't recognize, but she silenced it all. Micah babbled in his car seat, oblivious to the strangeness of it all, and Ariel envied him for a moment. The simplicity of being 8 months old, where the world was just textures and sounds and the comfort of knowing your mother was close. The car pulled up to a building that made her breath catch. All glass and steel and modern architecture that screamed money in a language she'd never learned to speak. The driver opened her door. "Mr. Larkin is expecting you on the 40th floor." Ariel nodded, suddenly unable to speak. She gathered Micah and her duffel bag, took a deep breath, and walked into a lobby that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The elevator ride up felt endless. She watched the numbers climb, 20, 25, 30, and tried to steady her breathing. This was insane. She was going to a stranger's home. A stranger who'd sent her $50,000 and then disappeared for 3 weeks and now wanted to help her again. What if this was a mistake? What if she'd misread everything? The elevator dinged. 40th floor. The doors opened to a private foyer with a single door. Before she could knock, it opened. And there he was. Grant Larkin looked nothing like the man from the magazine covers she'd Googled late one night. No tailored suit. No polished confidence. Just jeans, actual worn jeans with a frayed hem, and a faded hoodie that looked like it had survived a decade of lazy Sundays. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. His eyes were tired but warm. He looked human. More than that, he looked nervous. "Ariel," he said, and hearing her name in his actual voice instead of through text made something in her chest tighten. "Grant," she managed. They stood there for a moment, two people who'd shared their darkest truths through screens now confronted with the reality of each other in 3 dimensions. Then Micah broke the tension by reaching out toward Grant and making his demanding up sound. Grant's expression softened. "Hey, little man." He looked at Ariel. "Can I?" She hesitated, then nodded. Grant took Micah carefully, awkwardly, like someone who'd once known how to hold a baby but had forgotten the muscle memory. Micah grabbed his hoodie string and giggled. "He likes you," Ariel said quietly. "Kids and dogs," Grant replied, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "The only honest judges of character left." He stepped back, gesturing inside. "Come in. Please." Ariel had expected something cold and modern. Minimalist furniture, sterile white walls, the kind of space that looked expensive but felt empty. Instead, Grant's penthouse was warm. Yes, the view was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Yes, the furniture was expensive. But there were books stacked on the coffee table, a worn blanket draped over the couch, a coffee mug with a ring stain on the side table. It looked lived in, if lonely. "Guest suite is down the hall," Grant said, still holding Micah. "Private bathroom, already set up with basics." He cleared his throat. "I bought some baby stuff. Crib, changing table. I didn't know what you'd need, so I kind of guessed. If it's wrong, we can." "You bought a crib?" "And diapers. 3 different brands because I didn't know which one was best." The store clerk looked at me like I was insane. Ariel felt something crack open in her chest. This man, this millionaire who could have just sent money and walked away, had gone to a store and stood in the baby aisle trying to pick the right diapers. "Thank you," she whispered. Grant looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the same vulnerability in his eyes that she heard in his late-night texts. "I'm glad you came," he said simply. Micah grabbed Grant's nose. The moment broke. Grant laughed, a real laugh, and Ariel felt herself relax for the first time in weeks. An hour later, after she'd settled into the guest suite and fed Micah, Ariel found Grant in the kitchen unpacking a grocery bag. "I brought food," he said without looking up. "You said Micah likes mashed potatoes, so I got sweet potatoes and regular potatoes because I wasn't sure which kind you meant. Also formula, again, 3 brands, and those little puff things babies eat. Are those good?" The internet said they were good. Ariel leaned against the doorframe, watching him fumble with baby food containers like they were foreign objects. "You researched baby snacks?" "I researched a lot of things." He finally looked at her. "I wanted to get it right." "Why?" The question hung between them. Grant set down the container he was holding and faced her fully. "Because for 3 weeks, texting you was the only thing that felt real in my life. And when that stopped..." He exhaled. I remembered what loneliness actually felt like. I don't want to go back to that. Ariel crossed her arms, not defensively but protectively. I'm not your charity case, Grant. I know. And I'm not some project you get to fix so you feel better about yourself. I know that too. Then what am I? Grant held her gaze. You're my reminder that people still matter. That connection matters. That there's more to life than board meetings and stock prices and pretending I'm okay when I haven't been okay in years. The honesty in his voice stripped away her defenses. She wanted to stay guarded, wanted to protect herself from getting hurt, but his transparency made armor feel pointless. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Do what? Trust someone who isn't family. Let someone help without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Grant nodded slowly. Then don't trust me yet. Just stay for dinner. See if I'm as awkward in person as I am over text. Despite everything, Ariel smiled. That's a pretty low bar. I specialize in low bars and exceeded expectations. They ordered takeout, Thai food, because Grant's cooking skills were criminally negligent, and Ariel was too tired to pretend she had the energy to make anything. They ate at his dining table with Micah in a borrowed high chair, making a mess of mashed sweet potatoes exactly as advertised. The conversation started stilted, careful small talk about the food, the view, anything but the elephant in the room. Then Micah laughed at something, probably Grant's exaggerated reaction to trying the spicy curry, and the ice cracked. He's got a good laugh, Grant said, smiling at the baby. He gets it from his dad. Ariel said it without thinking, then froze. Grant glanced at her. You don't talk about him much. In the texts. It hurts less that way. She pushed food around her plate. Marcus he was good. Really good. The kind of person who remembered your coffee order and brought you soup when you were sick. He would have been an amazing father. What happened? Undiagnosed heart condition. He died picking up dinner. She met Grant's eyes. 1 minute we're texting about spring rolls. The next minute I'm getting a call from the hospital. Just like that, gone. Grant was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, Grant agreed. It doesn't. But sometimes it's all we have to offer. Ariel appreciated that he didn't try to make it better, didn't search for silver linings. He just sat with her grief like it was valid and didn't need fixing. What about you? She asked. Your daughter. She saw him tense slightly. You don't have to, she added quickly. No, Grant set down his fork. I want to. I just haven't talked about it in a long time. Grant stared at his plate, gathering words like they were scattered pieces he had to fit together carefully. Her name was Lily, he said finally. My daughter. We never got to bring her home. Ariel's breath caught. Vanessa, my ex-wife, went into labor 3 weeks early. Everything seemed fine at first. Then it wasn't. Cord compression. They tried everything, but his voice cracked. She was born sleeping. That's what they call it. Sleeping. Like she's going to wake up someday. Grant. We held her for 2 hours. I counted every finger, every toe. She was perfect. Just not alive. He looked up, eyes red but tearless. Vanessa wanted to try again eventually. Said it would help us heal. But I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, all I saw was that nursery we'd painted yellow. All I felt was that weight in my arms that should have been squirming and crying but wasn't. Ariel reached across the table without thinking and took his hand. He held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. We fell apart after that, he continued. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like 2 people slowly drowning in separate rooms. The divorce was finalized on what would have been Lily's 2nd birthday. I'm so sorry, Ariel whispered. Everyone's sorry, Grant echoed her earlier words with a sad smile. Sorry doesn't bring her back. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence, hands still joined across the table, 2 people who understood that some losses don't heal, they just become part of who you are. Later, after they'd cleaned up dinner and put Micah down in the borrowed crib, Ariel found Grant standing at the window, staring at the city lights. I almost gave him up, she said quietly. Grant turned. Micah. When I found out I was pregnant, Marcus was already gone. No family support. No money. I was failing out of nursing school. She wrapped her arms around herself. The adoption counselor was so kind. Showed me all these profiles of couples who wanted a baby so badly. People with houses and savings and two-parent homes. But you didn't. I couldn't. Her voice broke. I went to the agency to sign the papers. Micah was 3 days old. They brought him to me one last time so I could say goodbye, and when I held him. She wiped her eyes. I just kept thinking about how Marcus would never meet him. How he'd miss every smile, every laugh, every milestone. And if I gave him away, it would be like Marcus really was gone. Like we never existed. Grant crossed the room and stood beside her, not touching but present. So I took him home, Ariel continued. And some days I wonder if I made the right choice. If Micah would have been better off with parents who could give him everything instead of a mother who can barely give him enough. But then he smiles at me, and I know, wrong or right, I couldn't have done anything else. You gave him love, Grant said softly. That's not nothing. Says the man who gave me $50,000. That was just money. You gave him everything. Ariel looked at Grant, really looked at him, and saw someone who understood loss in a language they'd both learned against their will. Why did you really send that money? She asked. Grant was quiet for a long moment. Because when I read your message that night, I felt something I hadn't felt since Lily died. Purpose. Like maybe I could matter to someone in a way that wasn't transactional. Like maybe I could help someone fight instead of watching from the sidelines. You did help. More than you know. Then maybe we helped each other. They stood at the window together, watching the city pulse below them. Micah slept soundly down the hall. The silence between them felt different now, not empty but full. Comfortable. I used to count the lights, Grant said. Pretend each one was a life less hollow than mine. And now I think about how one of those lights was yours. How a wrong number connected us across all that distance. Ariel smiled softly. You're getting philosophical. It's late. I get weird when I'm tired. I know. Your 2 a.m. texts were evidence of that. Grant laughed quietly. They fell back into silence, but it wasn't awkward anymore. It was the kind of silence you share with someone who sees you, really sees you, and doesn't look away. Grant. Yeah. Thank you for this. For the space. For not making it weird. Trust me, I'm making it weird internally. She laughed, surprising herself. When was the last time she'd laughed twice in one night? Grant glanced at her, his expression soft. Maybe that $50 wasn't a mistake after all. Ariel met his eyes, seeing in them the same strange mix of grief and hope she felt in herself. Maybe neither were we, she said quietly. The words hung between them, not a promise, not a declaration, just an acknowledgement that something was beginning. Something fragile and uncertain but real. Grant's hand moved slightly closer to hers on the windowsill. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. She didn't pull away. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars. Two people who'd found each other through a mistake stood side by side, watching the world continue without them for a moment. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. That night, after Ariel had retreated to the guest suite and the penthouse had settled into quiet, she lay awake listening to Micah's soft breathing. Her phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. No reporters. No gossip. Just peace. She thought about Grant down the hall, probably standing at that window again, counting lights and pretending not to feel things. She thought about Marcus, about Lily, about all the ways love could break you and remake you into something different. She thought about trust, and what it meant to let someone see your cracks without fear of judgment. Then she picked up her phone and sent a text. I'm glad I stayed. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Grant, I'm glad you trusted me. Ariel, don't make me regret it. Grant, I'll try my best. No promises though. I'm pretty awkward. Ariel, I know. I've read your texts. Grant, rude but fair. She smiled in the darkness, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate kind that clings to anything just to survive. The real kind. The kind that says maybe, just maybe, something beautiful could grow from broken pieces. She set her phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new complications. The world was still waiting outside with cameras and questions and judgment. But tonight, she was safe. And that felt like enough. Ariel had been staying at Grant's penthouse for 5 days when her world caught fire again. She woke to her phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. Not just a few messages, but a constant stream of notifications that wouldn't stop. Still half asleep, she grabbed it and squinted at the screen. 53 missed calls. 200 unread texts. Her stomach dropped. The first headline she saw made her breath stop. Tech millionaire's secret texts with struggling M exposed. Romance or manipulation? No. No, no, no. With shaking hands, she clicked the article. Her entire body went cold. There, displayed for the world to see, were screenshots of their private messages. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to make something beautiful look twisted. Grant, talking to you is the best part of my day. Ariel, same. The article spun it as evidence of romantic manipulation. A poor woman preying on a lonely billionaire's grief. A calculated seduction disguised as authenticity. The comments were brutal. She knew exactly what she was doing. Gold Digger 101. Act vulnerable, get paid. He's an idiot for falling for it. Ariel scrolled through message after message, watching strangers dissect her life, her motives, her character. They didn't know her. Didn't know what it felt like to survive on scraps, to hold your baby and wonder if love was enough when the bills kept coming. They just knew the story they wanted to believe. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the phone. A soft knock on her door. Ariel. Grant's voice, careful and concerned. She couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. The door opened slowly. Grant stood there in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, phone in hand, face pale. You saw, he said quietly. She nodded, throat too tight for words. I'm so sorry. My PR team thinks it was someone from the board. They wanted to force me out, and this, he ran a hand through his hair. This was ammunition. They think I'm using you, Ariel whispered. They think I planned this whole thing. Anyone with half a brain knows that's not true. Half a brain isn't the problem. It's the other half that's louder. Grant's emergency board meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. He told Ariel she didn't have to leave, that she was safe in the penthouse, but they both knew the optics were terrible. Her staying there only fed the narrative, the poor single mom moving into the rich man's home, exactly what the headlines wanted to prove. She packed her things while Grant was gone, moving mechanically through motions that felt like defeat. Micah played on the floor, oblivious to the fact that the small piece they'd found was already crumbling. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Former co-workers from the diner asking if the rumors were true. People from her building she'd never spoken to suddenly wanting interviews. Tasha calling over and over with apologies that felt too late to matter. She silenced it all and focused on breathing. 3 hours later, Grant returned. One look at his face told her everything. They asked for your resignation, she said. Not a question. He nodded, loosening his tie like it was choking him. Either I step down voluntarily or they vote me out. They're calling it conduct unbecoming of company leadership. Over texts. Over judgment. They're saying I'm emotionally compromised. That sending you money was the first sign of instability. That continuing contact after the story went viral showed poor decision-making. He laughed bitterly. They suggested I seek help. Ariel felt rage and shame twist together in her chest. This is my fault. It's not. Yes, it is. If I hadn't texted you that night, if I hadn't been so desperate, then I'd still be standing at that window counting lights and pretending to be alive. Grant crossed the room, standing in front of her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You didn't ruin anything, Ariel. You reminded me what it felt like to care about something real. And now you're losing your company because of it. Then maybe it wasn't worth keeping. That night, alone in a motel room she checked into under a fake name, Ariel stared at her phone for an hour before finally typing the message she'd been composing in her head all day. You shouldn't have sent it. She hit send before she could stop herself. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Grant, sent what? Ariel, the money. You should have just sent back the $50 and forgotten about me. None of this would have happened. You'd still have your company, your reputation, your life. The dots appeared again, stayed longer this time. Grant, and you'd still be drowning. Still invisible. Still fighting alone. Ariel, at least I'd be the only one hurting. Grant, you think I wasn't already hurting? You think my life before you was anything other than expensive emptiness? She stared at the words, vision blurring. Ariel, I don't deserve this. Any of this. The hate, the judgment, the way they're tearing you apart because you tried to help me. The response came quickly, forcefully. Grant, you deserve to be seen. You deserve to know that your struggle mattered to someone. Don't let them take that from you. Don't let them make you invisible again. Ariel's breath hitched. Tears she'd been holding back all day finally broke free. Grant, they can take my job. They can take my reputation. They can't take the fact that meeting you, even like this, even through a mistake, was the first real thing that's happened to me in 3 years. She read it twice. 3 times. Each word settling into her chest like stones building a foundation. Ariel, what do we do? Grant, we tell the truth. Not through headlines. Not through lawyers. Just the truth. Ariel, how? Grant, leave that to me. But I need you to trust me one more time. She thought about everything that had brought them here. The wrong number. The impossible gift. The late-night texts that had become lifelines. The way he'd held Micah like something precious. The grief they'd shared without performing it. Ariel, I trust you. 2 days later, Ariel received a call from a producer at a major morning show. We'd like to give you a chance to tell your side, the woman said. No gotcha questions. Just your story, in your words. Live. Ariel's first instinct was to refuse. But then she thought about Grant's message. Don't let them make you invisible again. She called him. Did you set this up? I made some calls, Grant admitted. But the choice is yours. You don't owe anyone your story. What if I mess it up? What if I make it worse? Then it's worse. But at least you'll have spoken your truth. That night, Ariel stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her motel room, practicing what she wanted to say. Micah sat in his portable crib, watching her with wide eyes like he understood the weight of the moment. She thought about Marcus. About the nursing degree she'd never finished. About every night she'd gone to bed hungry so Micah could eat. About the $50 that had felt like her last hope. She thought about Grant standing at his window, counting lights and dying slowly inside his success. She thought about what the world had made of their story, and what the truth actually was. The studio lights were blinding. Ariel sat in a chair across from the host, a woman named Patricia Chun with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness, and tried to remember how to breathe. Ariel Porter, thank you for being here, Patricia began. The past few weeks have been difficult for you. That's an understatement, Ariel said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Let's start with the basics. The viral story claimed you accidentally sent $50 to a stranger who sent back $50,000. Is that true? Yes. Every word of it. And the texts that were leaked, were they real? Ariel's hands tightened in her lap. They were real. And they were private. They were conversations between 2 people trying to figure out what connection means in a world that makes you feel invisible. Some have suggested you manipulated Mr. Larkin. That you saw an opportunity and took advantage of a grieving man. The accusation hung in the air. Ariel felt her heart pounding but kept her voice calm. I can't control what people choose to believe, she said. But I can tell you what actually happened. I was a single mother working double shifts and barely surviving. I made a mistake, a typo, and sent my last $50 to the wrong number. I wasn't looking for a miracle. I was just desperate. And when he sent $50,000? I thought it was a scam. I called my bank twice to make sure it was real. My first instinct wasn't gratitude, it was fear. Because in my experience, nothing comes without strings. Patricia leaned forward. But you kept the money. I did. Because my landlord was threatening eviction and my son needed to eat. I used it for rent and groceries and diapers, not designer bags or vacations. Just survival. And the texts? The relationship that developed. Ariel's voice softened. We were two lonely people who found something real in the unlikeliest place. He'd lost a daughter. I'd lost a partner. We understood each other's grief in a way most people couldn't. The texts weren't manipulation, they were honesty. Maybe the last honest thing either of us had. What do you want people to know about Grant Larkin? Ariel looked directly at the camera, knowing Grant was watching somewhere. He didn't save me with money, she said, voice steady and clear. Money paid my rent. But Grant, he saved me by reminding me that kindness isn't extinct. That empathy still exists. That someone could see me struggling and not look away. Her voice cracked slightly. The world sees a rich man and a poor woman and assumes the worst. But what actually happened was two broken people helping each other remember what it feels like to be human. And if that's a scandal, then I don't understand the world anymore. Patricia nodded slowly. Thank you, Ariel. That was incredibly brave. Grant watched the interview from his apartment, standing at the window like always, phone forgotten in his hand. When Ariel said, he saved me by reminding me that kindness isn't extinct, something cracked open in his chest. She saved me too, he whispered to the empty room. The tears came unexpectedly, not from grief this time, but from something else. Something that felt like relief. Like being seen. Like mattering. His phone started buzzing. Text after text flooding in. Brett from PR, boss, the comments are shifting. People are supporting her. Supporting you both. He opened social media against his better judgment. The tide was turning. I believe her. This is what real kindness looks like. They found each other through a mistake and were treating them like criminals? Leave them alone and let them be happy. The hate was still there, it always would be, but it was being drowned out by something else. Understanding. Empathy. People who saw past the headlines to the human story underneath. Grant sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. His phone rang. Olivia, his assistant. They're pulling the resignation demand, she said without preamble. The board just held an emergency vote. Public sentiment shifted too fast. They can't force you out now without looking like villains. So I still have a job. If you want it. Grant looked around his penthouse. At the life he'd built that had felt like a tomb until a wrong number changed everything. I'll think about it, he said. 3 weeks passed. Ariel returned to her apartment, new locks, new boundaries with reporters who'd finally lost interest. She went back to work at the diner, where her co-workers treated her with a strange mix of respect and curiosity. Grant stepped back from public view. Gave up his CEO position voluntarily, staying on the board but hiring someone else to run day-to-day operations. He needed space, he told the press. Time to figure out what actually mattered. They texted occasionally, brief messages checking in, making sure the other was okay. But the intensity had cooled, both of them needing distance to process everything that had happened. Ariel convinced herself it was over. Whatever they'd started had been consumed by the fire of public scrutiny. Maybe some connections weren't meant to survive the real world. Then the invitation arrived. Hand-delivered by courier, her name written in careful script on thick cardstock. You are cordially invited to the grand opening of the 50-room community center, A Place for New Beginnings Saturday, 2 p.m. An address she didn't recognize. No signature. No explanation. But at the bottom, in smaller handwriting she knew from goodbye notes left on her counter. Please come. There's something I want to show you. Ariel held the invitation for a long time, heart pounding, wondering what Grant had built from the ashes of everything they'd survived. On Saturday morning, she dressed Micah in his nicest outfit, the one she'd bought with Grant's money, back when the world felt full of possibility. She called a car. And she went to see what hope looked like when it refused to die. The address led to a neighborhood Ariel recognized, not far from her own apartment, but on a street she'd never paid attention to before. Working class, tired-looking, the kind of place where people kept their heads down and their struggles private. The car pulled up to a building that looked recently renovated. Fresh paint, soft yellow, like sunrise. New windows. A small garden out front with flowers just beginning to bloom. And above the door, a sign in simple black letters. The 50 room, a place to begin again. Ariel's breath caught. She unbuckled Micah from his car seat, legs shaky as she stepped onto the sidewalk. The building hummed with activity. She could hear voices inside, laughter, the sound of children playing. Then she saw him. Grant stood by the entrance, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that looked freshly pressed but already slightly wrinkled. His hands fidgeted at his sides, then moved to adjust his collar, then finally settled holding a small bouquet. Not roses. Not orchids or anything expensive. Daisies. Simple, white daisies tied with kitchen twine, the kind you buy at a corner bodega for $5. When he saw her, his entire face transformed. Relief mixed with nervousness, mixed with something that looked dangerously close to joy. "You came," he said, voice rough like he'd been holding his breath. "You built something," Ariel replied, looking at the building, then back at him. "You built this." Grant shook his head slowly. "No. You did. I just funded what you already had inside you." She didn't understand, not yet, but before she could ask, Grant stepped forward and offered her the daisies with the awkwardness of someone who'd never been good at grand gestures. "They're not much. But I remembered you said Marcus used to bring you flowers from that bodega on 5th Street. The one with the cat that sits in the window. And I thought," he cleared his throat, "I thought maybe cheap flowers from someone who cares are better than expensive ones from someone who doesn't." Ariel took them, throat tight. "They're perfect." Grant held the door open, and Ariel stepped into something she didn't have words for. The interior was warm and welcoming, soft lighting, comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. But more than the space itself, it was what filled it that made her eyes burn with tears. Children played in a corner area filled with toys and books. Not expensive things, but sturdy, well-chosen, arranged with care. A small kitchen area where 3 women sat drinking coffee and laughing about something one of them had said. In another room, she could see cribs, a whole row of them, and a changing station stocked with supplies. A woman around Ariel's age approached, carrying a toddler on her hip and wearing a name tag that read Keisha, night shift coordinator. "You must be Ariel," Keisha said, smiling warmly. "Grant told us you might come. Welcome home." "Home." Ariel's voice came out barely above a whisper. "That's what this place is," Keisha explained. "A home for mothers who work overnight shifts and need somewhere safe for their babies. A place where we don't have to choose between keeping our jobs and keeping our kids close." Ariel turned to Grant, understanding dawning. "This is a 24-hour childcare center," Grant said quietly. 4 single parents working non-traditional hours. No one gets turned away for inability to pay. Sliding scale fees based on income. The staff includes social workers, pediatric nurses, and people who actually understand what it's like to survive on the margins. How? I liquidated some assets. Sold my 3rd car that I never drove. Redirected money I was wasting on galas I hated attending. He met her eyes. Turned out I had a lot of resources once I stopped spending them on pretending to have a life. Another woman approached, older, wearing an apron covered in flour. "The community kitchen is this way if you'd like to see. We do meal prep twice a week. Parents can take home pre-portioned meals, they just have to heat up. Nobody should have to choose between sleep and feeding their family." Ariel walked through the center in a daze, Micah babbling happily in her arms. Every room revealed another thoughtful detail. A lactation room with comfortable chairs and a lock for privacy. A small library with parenting books and children's stories. A laundry area with industrial machines. A quiet room with soft lighting for mothers who just needed 20 minutes to breathe. "Why is it called the 50 room?" she asked finally. Grant stood beside her in front of a wall covered in photos, mothers and children, smiling, exhausted, hopeful faces. "Because $50 was the difference between despair and hope for you that night," he said softly. "And I realized there are thousands of people living one $50 emergency away from catastrophe. This place is designed to be that buffer. That moment of grace when everything feels impossible." Ariel's vision blurred with tears. "Grant, this is what should have existed all along," he finished. "What you deserved to have access to when you were drowning. What every struggling parent deserves. They walked through the small garden out back, where a few benches sat among the new flowers. Micah had fallen asleep against Ariel's shoulder, exhausted from all the new sights and sounds. Grant reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Plain, white, no embellishment. "I need to give you something," he said. Ariel's stomach tightened. "Grant, if this is money." "It's not." He handed it to her. "Open it." Inside was a single document. She scanned the first few lines, then read more carefully. Partnership agreement, the 50-room community center. Her name was listed as co-founder and managing partner. 50% ownership. Full operational control. A salary that was fair without being charity, enough to support herself and Micah while doing work that mattered. "I don't understand," she whispered. Grant took a breath. "When this place was just an idea, I thought about what you said that night. About wanting to be a nurse. About having to give up your dreams when life got hard. This isn't nursing school, but," he gestured to the building, "this is care work. Real care work. And you understand it in a way I never could because you've lived it. You want me to run this? I want us to run it. Together. You bring the understanding of what families actually need. I bring the resources to make it sustainable. But this time," his voice grew firmer, "this time, I'm not giving you money. I'm giving you partnership. Agency. A stake in something that belongs to you as much as it belongs to me." Ariel stared at the document, at her name in official print next to his. This wasn't rescue. This wasn't charity. This was respect. "Why?" she asked, voice breaking. "Because you said once that you're not my charity case. You were right. You never were." Grant's eyes were intense, honest. "You're the person who reminded me what purpose feels like. And this," he gestured to the 50-room. "This is what happens when someone actually listens to the people they're trying to help instead of deciding what they need from a distance." Ariel looked down at Micah sleeping peacefully, then at the building full of mothers and children finding refuge, then at Grant standing there with hope and nervousness written all over his face. "This is really mine?" she asked. 50%? Equal say. Every decision. Every policy. Every mother we help." He nodded. "I'm not your benefactor, Ariel. I want to be your partner." She read the document again, slower this time, making sure it was real. Making sure this wasn't another dream that would dissolve in daylight. It was real. All of it. She looked up at Grant, tears streaming freely now. "Then stay." His breath caught. "What?" "You're offering me partnership. I'm offering you the same thing." She smiled through tears. "Stay. Not just in this project. Stay in my life. In Micah's life. Stop standing at windows counting lights and actually be present for the one you helped create." Grant's eyes went bright with unshed tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But I'm sure. You're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But maybe that's okay. Maybe two imperfect people can build something real if they're honest about it." He stepped closer, careful not to wake Micah. "I don't know how to do this. The relationship thing. I've been terrible at it historically. Then we'll figure it out together. Just like everything else." Grant reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face gently, thumbs wiping away her tears. "You know you're remarkable, right?" he whispered. "I'm just someone who sent money to the wrong number." "No. You're someone who fought for her son when everyone said to give up. Someone who survived on scraps and still had kindness left over. Someone who saw a broken man and didn't run away." His voice cracked. "You're someone who made me want to live again." Ariel leaned into his touch, feeling the weight of everything they'd survived. "So what do we do now?" "Now." Grant smiled softly. "Now we run a community center. Help people. Raise your son. Figure out what comes next without cameras or headlines or anyone's permission." That sounds terrifying. That sounds perfect. An hour later, the official ribbon-cutting ceremony began. Local families gathered, some who'd already been helped by the 50-room soft opening, others who'd heard about it and came hoping for assistance. News crews were there too, but this time the story felt different. Not sensational. Just honest. Ariel stood at the podium with Micah in her arms, Grant beside her, and looked at the crowd of faces waiting to hear what she'd say. 3 months ago, I made a mistake, she began, voice steady. I sent $50 to the wrong number. That mistake led to a miracle I didn't ask for and definitely didn't deserve. But more than that, it led to understanding something important. She glanced at Grant, who nodded encouragement. We live in a world that tells struggling people they're failing because they're not trying hard enough. That if you're poor, it's your fault. That asking for help is weakness. Her voice grew stronger. But that's a lie. The truth is that most of us are one emergency away from catastrophe. One car breakdown, one missed paycheck, one typo that sends money to the wrong place. A few people in the crowd nodded, recognizing their own stories. The 50 room exists because everyone deserves grace. Because childcare shouldn't be a luxury. Because working mothers shouldn't have to choose between their jobs and their children's safety. Because $50 or $50,000 can change a life if it's given with respect instead of pity. She looked at the building behind her, at the sign that bore the name of their unlikely beginning. This place isn't about one person's generosity. It's about building systems that catch people before they fall. And it's about remembering that we're all more connected than we think, sometimes by something as random as a wrong number. The crowd applauded. Cameras clicked. But Ariel barely heard it, focused instead on the mothers holding their children tight, seeing themselves reflected in her story. Grant stepped forward to say a few words, but he kept them brief. I'm just the money. Ariel's the heart. Thank you all for being here. Together, they cut the ribbon. The 50 room was officially open. Nighttime in Ariel's apartment, no longer the cramped studio she'd left, but a modest 2-bedroom she could finally afford without drowning. Micah, now over a year old and walking with wobbly determination, had finally gone down after his bedtime story. Ariel stood in the kitchen making tea, watching Grant on a stepladder trying to fix a light fixture that had been flickering for days. You know we could call an electrician, she said, suppressing a smile. And miss the chance to prove I have practical skills? Grant adjusted something with a screwdriver. I'll have you know I watched 3 YouTube videos about this. That fills me with confidence. Your sarcasm is noted and ignored. The light flickered, then steadied, glowing warm and constant. Grant climbed down looking unreasonably proud of himself. See? Practical skills. Ariel handed him tea, and they settled on the couch together, a piece of furniture they'd picked out at a second-hand store, arguing good-naturedly about whether function or comfort mattered more. The city glowed beyond the window, millions of lights representing millions of lives. But Ariel wasn't counting them anymore. Wasn't wondering which ones were hollow. She'd found the light that mattered. Grant's arm draped across the back of the couch, not quite touching her but close enough that she could feel his warmth. They'd been taking things slow, learning each other in 3 dimensions instead of through screens. Some days were easy. Some days were awkward. All of them were real. How was the center today? Grant asked. Good. We helped 4 new families get enrolled. One of the mothers cried when she saw the overnight childcare option. Said she's been working graveyard shifts at a hospital and paying a neighbor under the table to watch her kids, never sure if they were actually safe. And now they are. Now they are. Ariel leaned her head against his shoulder. We're making a difference, Grant. A real one. You're making a difference. I just sign the checks. You do more than that. I fix lights. Occasionally. She laughed softly, and they fell into comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when 2 people have survived enough together to stop performing for each other. Ariel. Thank you. She lifted her head to look at him. For what? For sending $50 to the wrong number. For being desperate enough to ask a stranger for help. For reminding me that connection still exists if you're willing to be vulnerable enough to reach for it. Ariel's eyes stung with familiar tears, the good kind. You know what's funny? What? I spent months thinking I'd made a mistake that night. Wrong number, wrong person, wrong everything. But sometimes, she looked out at the city, then back at him. Sometimes the wrong number is the right person. Grant's expression softened. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, touch gentle and deliberate. "Sometimes the wrong number is the right destiny," he murmured. Then he kissed her, soft, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She kissed him back, tasting tea and hope and the possibility of something neither of them had believed in before a typo changed everything. When they pulled apart, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I probably shouldn't say it yet. It's probably too soon. But I've been typing and deleting that text for 2 months, and I'm tired of being afraid." Ariel's heart swelled. "I love you too. Even when you're awkward and overthink everything and watch 3 YouTube videos to fix a light. Especially then." Especially then. 6 months became a year. The 50-room expanded to 2 locations. Ariel finished her nursing prerequisites part-time while running the centers. Grant insisted she didn't have to choose between her dream and their work. They could build space for both. Micah took his first steps in the 50-room's playroom, surrounded by other children whose mothers worked overnight shifts and single fathers trying to piece together daycare between jobs. His first word was Gone, his version of Grant, who'd been there enough times that even a toddler recognized home when he saw it. Grant sold his penthouse and bought a smaller place, still nice, but with room for a family instead of showcasing emptiness. Ariel and Micah moved in slowly, first a drawer, then a closet, then half the bedroom, until one day Grant looked around and realized his apartment had become their home. They didn't get married right away. Didn't rush toward traditional milestones, because their story had never been traditional. But they built something more important than ceremonies. They built partnership. Equality. Mutual respect that came from seeing each other's worst and choosing to stay anyway. On the 1-year anniversary of the wrong number text, they sat at the 50-room after everyone had gone home, looking at the wall of photos they'd added, hundreds of families they'd helped, each one a ripple from that original $50 mistake. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd gotten the number right?" Grant asked. Ariel considered it. "I would have paid my rent. Kept struggling. Eventually figured something out because that's what I always did. And I would have kept standing at my window, counting lights and pretending it was the same as living. Then I'm glad I can't type and cry at the same time." Grant laughed, the real laugh she'd learned to treasure, the one that meant he'd forgotten to guard himself. He pulled her close, and she settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "You know what the best part is," she murmured. "What?" "We didn't just save each other. We saved all of them." She gestured to the photos. Every mother who doesn't have to choose between work and childcare. Every kid who gets to sleep safely while their parent earns a living. Every family who gets caught before they fall. "One $50 mistake at a time," Grant said softly. "One act of grace at a time," Ariel corrected. Outside, the city hummed with millions of stories, some tragic, some triumphant, most somewhere in between. But inside the 50-room, 2 people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances held each other and knew this truth. Sometimes destiny looks like a typo. Sometimes salvation comes from a stranger. Sometimes the wrong number connects you to exactly the right person. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to be vulnerable, honest enough to be seen, and willing enough to reach across the divide, love finds you in the last place you expected. Through a mistake that became a miracle. Through $50 that turned into 50,000 connections. Through one woman's desperation and one man's loneliness that transformed into hope neither of them knew they still had. The lights flickered once, then steadied. And in the warm glow of everything they built together, Ariel and Grant held each other and believed in grace.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.